Look at Chicago's skyline today. You see glass towers and steel giants, a modern city of ambition. But beneath the shimmer lies a hidden story. A story written over a century ago, when a handful of families, richer than kings, shaped Chicago's destiny. They didn't just build homes, they built palaces. They didn't just run businesses, they controlled entire industries. These were America's hidden royals, and their power still echoes through the city today. In its streets, its museums, even its bones. This is the untold story of the 10 richest old money families who built Chicago. And the family at number 1? Their empire will shock you. And so, our journey into Chicago's skyline today, you see glass towers and steel giants, a modern city of ambition. But beneath the shimmer lies a hidden story. A story written over a century ago, when a handful of families, richer than kings, shaped Chicago's destiny. They didn't just build homes, they built palaces. They didn't just run businesses, they controlled entire industries. These were America's hidden royals, and their power still echoes through the city today. In its streets, its museums, even its bones. This is the untold story of the 10 richest old money families who built Chicago. And the family at number 1? Their empire will shock you. And so, our journey into this remarkable history begins. Kicking things off at number 10, the Wrigley family. When the name Wrigley echoes in the chambers of your mind, it is highly probable that 2 distinct iconic American images immediately spring forth. The first is the simple, satisfyingly fresh snap of a stick of chewing gum, a small pleasure enjoyed by hundreds of millions. The second is the deafening, joyous roar of a capacity crowd, packed into the historic confines of a classic American ballpark on a sunny Chicago afternoon. And in conjuring these 2 images, you would be absolutely correct on both counts, for they are the twin pillars upon which this family's enduring legacy rests. The story of this particular dynasty does not begin in a bank or a boardroom, but with a man who was a salesman down to his very soul, William Wrigley Jr. He was a man who seemed to have been born with an innate understanding of desire and persuasion. He arrived in the bustling, burgeoning city of Chicago in the spring of the year 1891. He did not arrive with a fortune, quite the opposite. He had a meager $32 to his name, a sum that could be lost in a single unlucky moment. But what he lacked in capital, he more than made up for with an abundance of something far more valuable. An unshakable, relentless grit. His initial plan, his first foray into the competitive world of Chicago commerce, was to sell his own father's brand of scouring soap. From the very beginning of his career, William Wrigley Jr. demonstrated an almost preternatural mastery of a sales technique that would come to define his success. The giveaway, the premium, the little something extra. To make his father's soap seem more appealing, to make it stand out in a crowded market, he began a practice of throwing in a free can of baking powder with each and every purchase of soap. He was not just a seller, he was a keen and constant observer of human nature, a student of his customers' desires. And in watching them, he quickly noticed something truly interesting, a pattern of behavior that another man might have missed or dismissed. He saw that his customers were displaying far more excitement, far more genuine enthusiasm for the free baking powder he was giving away than they were for the scouring soap they were actually buying. Now, a lesser businessman might have seen this as a problem, as a failure of his primary product, but Wrigley saw it as an opportunity. In a strategic move that would come to define his entire career, he did not try to fight the current of consumer desire. He chose to swim with it, to ride its powerful wave. He made a pivot. He abandoned the soap that had brought him to Chicago and switched his entire business to selling the baking powder that his customers so clearly wanted. But this created a new challenge. He now needed a new premium, a new giveaway to entice people to buy his baking powder. He began offering 2 small packs of chewing gum with each can, and then history, as it so often does, repeated itself in the most profound way. The chewing gum was not just a minor success, it was a smash hit. The public loved it. Wrigley, a man who could see an opportunity from a mile away, made his final, most brilliant pivot. He saw that the true gold was not in the soap, not even in the baking powder, but in this simple, flavorful confection. He went all in on gum. He launched his own brands, most notably Spearmint and Juicy Fruit, names that would soon leave the confines of Chicago and become global phenomena recognized in nearly every corner of the world. Yet, William Wrigley Jr. was not just a great salesman. He was, in the truest sense of the word, an advertising pioneer. He possessed a profound belief in the power of making his brand ubiquitous, of weaving it into the very fabric of American daily life. He wanted Wrigley's to be a name people saw and heard every single day. To achieve this, he poured millions upon millions of dollars into advertising campaigns, at a time when spending such sums was considered an almost unheard-of reckless financial risk. His immense and growing wealth allowed him to indulge his personal passions, most notably his love for the game of baseball. This led him to purchase the Chicago Cubs baseball team in the year 1920. Just 6 short years later, he made a move that would forever cement the family name in the heart of the city and in the annals of sports history. He renamed the team's ballpark Wrigley Field. His ambition, however, was not confined to the shores of Lake Michigan. He looked west and purchased Santa Catalina Island, a jewel off the coast of Southern California, and personally oversaw its transformation into a beloved and accessible tourist destination. And of course, in Chicago, there is the Wrigley Building, that gleaming, floodlit, terracotta-clad skyscraper that stands sentinel on Michigan Avenue, is not just another office building. It is a monument to his staggering success, a brilliant white beacon of the incredible fortune he managed to build from the humble, simple stick of gum. The story of the Wrigley family serves as powerful proof of how a very simple idea, when powered by relentless salesmanship and truly brilliant marketing, can create an enduring and beloved American dynasty, devastating his homeland. While a great many of Chicago's legendary fortunes can trace their historical roots back to the smoke-filled factories and the iron-clad railroads of the Gilded Age, the Pritzker dynasty stands apart as a formidable 20th century powerhouse. Theirs is a story that speaks not of industrial might, but of constant reinvention and incredibly shrewd forward-thinking investment. The saga begins not in a grand boardroom or on a bustling factory floor, but with a single man fleeing persecution, Nicholas Pritzker. He was a Jewish immigrant who made the desperate journey from Ukraine in 1881, escaping the horrific pogroms that were devastating his homeland. He arrived in Chicago, as so many did, penniless and knowing no one. But he was driven by a powerful will to survive and to succeed. He taught himself English, put himself through school, and eventually established a successful law firm. This firm was the solid foundation upon which his sons, and most especially his grandsons, would construct a global empire. The family methodically expanded their interests, moving from law into real estate and a wide and diverse array of other business investments. But their defining moment, the absolute masterstroke that would catapult them from mere wealth into the rarefied air of billionaires, arrived in the year 1957. J. Pritzker, a man blessed with an almost supernatural eye for a good deal, was on a business trip in Los Angeles. He was a keen observer of the changing world around him. He noticed that the new class of business travelers who were taking to the skies in the burgeoning jet age had a new and pressing need: convenient, high-quality lodging located right near the airports they were flying into. During that trip, he found a modest motel near Los Angeles International Airport, or LAX, called the Hyatt House. He saw its potential, and in a characteristically decisive move, he bought it on the spot. He and his brother Donald, who was widely regarded as the operational and managerial genius of the pair, recognized something profound. They understood that they weren't just buying a single physical motel, they were buying an idea. They could see the future of travel and hospitality stretching out before them. Together, with Jay's deal-making prowess and Donald's management skill, they methodically built the Hyatt brand into a global hotel empire. It became known for its quality and service, and perhaps most famously, for its architecturally daring and visually stunning atrium lobbies, a feature so unique it became a signature of the brand itself. And as a constant nod to its family roots, the company's global headquarters remains firmly planted in Chicago. Today, the Pritzker family is widely recognized as one of the wealthiest and most influential families in all of America, with a legacy that extends far, far beyond the world of luxury hotels. Over the years, they have owned a remarkably diverse portfolio of assets, from massive industrial conglomerates to luxury cruise lines. But it is their profound and lasting impact on their home city of Chicago that truly sets them apart in the annals of civic history. They have poured a significant portion of their vast wealth back into the city's civic and cultural life. They have funded major institutions that shape the minds and health of its citizens, such as the prestigious Pritzker School of Medicine at the University of Chicago. Perhaps most famously on a global scale, they used their fortune to establish the Pritzker Architecture Prize in 1979. This award, often referred to as the Nobel Prize of Architecture, was created to honor visionary architects from around the world who have made significant and lasting contributions to humanity and the built environment. The Pritzkers represent a distinctly modern form of old money, a dynasty whose immense influence is felt not just in the worlds of business and high finance, but profoundly in culture, in education, and even in the corridors of political power, with family members having served as the governor of Illinois and as a United States Secretary of Commerce. Vast, seemingly endless white pine forests of Michigan. While some of the great Chicago fortunes were constructed upon the back of flashy consumer goods or the complex, abstract world of high finance, the Ryersons' immense wealth was built on something far more fundamental, something far more tangible. It was built on the very material that was used to construct the rapidly growing cities of the American Midwest, lumber. The patriarch of this formidable family, Martin Ryerson, began his career as a fur trader in the rugged landscapes of the 1830s. But he was a man of keen foresight, and he soon came to realize that the real, seemingly inexhaustible money was not in animal pelts, but in the vast, seemingly endless white pine forests of Michigan. These forests represented a green gold mine waiting to be harvested. The family quickly established a thriving lumber business, a massive operation that cleared vast tracts of timber to feed the insatiable appetite of a growing nation. They made a strategically brilliant decision to move their headquarters to the logistical hub of Chicago, the perfect nexus point from which to manage their operations and ship their product. They became fantastically, fabulously wealthy, not just from the sale of timber itself, but by making a series of incredibly shrewd and well-timed investments in downtown Chicago real estate, particularly during the 1870s. They were buying up prime parcels of land when many others were hesitant, securing a foundational stake in the future of the city's commercial core. Martin's son, who was named Martin A. Ryerson, inherited this immense fortune. But instead of simply growing it further, he chose to dedicate his life to a different kind of construction, transforming that raw industrial wealth into a refined and enduring cultural legacy for his beloved city. Educated in the great capitals of Europe and possessing a refined cosmopolitan worldview, Martin A. Ryerson was driven by a deep passion for ensuring that his home city of Chicago would one day possess cultural institutions that could rival those of the great world capitals he so admired. It is reported that by the time he was just 36 years old, he was already the single richest man in Chicago. But instead of hoarding this vast wealth or spending it on personal extravagance, he embraced a role as one of the city's most important and dedicated civic leaders. He served with distinction as the president of the University of Chicago's Board of Trustees for an incredible 30 years, guiding the institution's growth. He was also a founding benefactor and was later named honorary president of the now world-famous Art Institute of Chicago. His contribution to the museum was not just financial, it was deeply personal and transformative. He and his wife generously donated their own extraordinary private art collection to the museum. This was a trove of priceless treasures that included masterpieces by visionary artists like Claude Monet and Pierre-Auguste Renoir. This single gift now forms a cornerstone of the museum's world-renowned collection of Impressionist art. The story of the Ryerson family beautifully and powerfully demonstrates how a fortune made from the harvesting of raw materials can be meticulously and thoughtfully crafted into an enduring cultural legacy that continues to enrich a city for many generations. American continent. He envisioned the name Pullman didn't just build a fortune, it did something far more profound. It fundamentally and forever changed the very experience of travel in America. George Pullman was not the man who invented the train, but he was, without question, the man who invented luxury train travel. His inspiration did not come from a grand vision of industry, but from a moment of intense personal discomfort. After suffering through a truly miserable overnight train ride, trying to find rest on hard, unforgiving wooden benches, he became utterly convinced that there had to be a better way. There had to be a more civilized, more comfortable way to cross the vast distances of the American continent. He envisioned a hotel on wheels. In the year 1865, he launched his revolutionary creation, the Pioneer sleeping car. For the traveling public of the time, it was nothing short of a revolution in transportation. Passengers who were accustomed to the Spartan and brutal conditions of long-distance rail travel were absolutely astounded by what they saw. They were greeted by plush velvet seats that ingeniously converted into comfortable, soft beds. They were surrounded by interiors of polished dark wood, gleaming brass, and fine upholstery. They were offered fine dining in dedicated cars and treated with impeccable service by uniformed attendants. His Pullman Palace Car Company grew into a massive industrial enterprise. Soon, thousands of his signature dark green cars were crisscrossing the country, making long-distance travel not just bearable, but a glamorous and desirable experience in its own right. But there is a much darker, much more complex and deeply troubled side to the Pullman story. In order to house the thousands of factory workers who built his magnificent rail cars, George Pullman built an entire, self-contained town on Chicago's South Side. At first, this town, named Pullman, was hailed by many as a model industrial community. It featured neat brick houses, manicured parks, a library, and other amenities that were rare for working-class communities of the era, but it was a town under his absolute, unyielding, and paternalistic control. He was not just their employer, he was their landlord and the sole arbiter of the town's rules. When a severe economic depression hit the country in 1893, Pullman made a fateful and disastrous decision. He cut his workers' wages by as much as 25%, citing the poor economy. But at the same time, he absolutely refused to lower the rent they were all forced to pay to live in his company town. This act of profound inequity sparked the infamous and violent Pullman strike of 1894. The strike, which was passionately supported by the American Railway Union led by the charismatic Eugene Fee Debs, quickly escalated into a violent nationwide conflict that completely shut down the country's vital rail system. The crisis grew so severe that President Grover Cleveland sent in federal troops to Chicago. The ensuing clashes between soldiers and striking workers left a trail of death and destruction, and they stained George Pullman's reputation permanently. Though his legacy is forever complicated by this bitter and bloody labor conflict, Pullman's impact on the world remains undeniable. The very idea of a luxury sleeper car, a private room gliding peacefully through the night, is a direct and undeniable descendant of the revolutionary concept he first brought to the American rails. Bring back any item for a full refund if they weren't satisfied. If the society of Gilded Age Chicago could be said to have had a royal couple, there is no doubt whatsoever that it was Potter and Bertha Palmer. Potter Palmer was, first and foremost, a merchant of unparalleled and almost startling genius. He was also a real estate visionary who, more than almost any other single individual, literally designed the Chicago that we still know today. He began his illustrious career with a modest dry goods store located on Lake Street. It was here that he introduced a set of radical, customer-friendly ideas that would revolutionize retail. Most notably, he instituted a no-questions-asked return policy, allowing customers to bring back any item for a full refund if they weren't satisfied. This was completely unheard of at the time and built a foundation of immense trust with the public. He eventually sold his share in this thriving business to his two partners, a duo named Marshall Field and Levi Leiter, in order to bet everything he had, his entire fortune, on real estate. Palmer possessed a vision for Chicago that few others could see. He saw the future of the city's commercial heart not on the existing main drag of Lake Street, but on a muddy, largely undeveloped track known simply as State Street. Others saw a dirt road. He saw a grand boulevard. He began buying up a huge swath of frontage along the street, investing millions. Then, through sheer force of will, personal investment, and persuading other businesses to follow his lead, he single-handedly transformed State Street into the city's grand shopping destination, its commercial soul. Then, absolute disaster struck. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 roared through the city, a terrifying inferno that wiped out almost everything he had painstakingly built. The fire consumed 32 of his buildings and the first magnificent iteration of his now legendary Palmer House Hotel. Lesser men would have been completely and utterly ruined, their spirits broken. Palmer, however, was undeterred. In an act of breathtaking confidence, he famously secured a loan for an incredible $1.7 million. Socialite, a progressive activist for women's rights, and an incredibly shrewd art collector with a pioneering and influential taste for French Impressionism. The Palmers did not just get rich in Chicago. They sculpted the very world of elegance, commerce, and society that the city's elite still inhabit to this very day. If you find yourself captivated by this deep dive into the colossal fortunes and the powerful dynasties that quite literally shape the city of Chicago, we'd like to ask you to do us a small favor and show your support. Please subscribe to our channel and be sure to hit that notification bell. We have a great many more stories to tell about history, about the accumulation of immense wealth, and about the exercise of power that built our modern world, and we promise you won't want to miss a single one of them. Julius Rosenwald, the son of German Jewish immigrants who had come to America seeking a better life, was quietly running a men's clothing business in Chicago. He was successful, but not yet a titan. Then in the year 1895, he made a decision. It was a decision that would not only fundamentally change the course of his own life, but would go on to positively impact the lives of millions of his fellow Americans. He invested in a small but rapidly growing mail-order business owned by a man named Richard Sears. The company was called Sears, Roebuck and Company. While Richard Sears was the undeniable advertising genius, the brilliant showman who could write copy that made people yearn for products they hadn't even known existed, Julius Rosenwald was the quiet operational mastermind who brought a much-needed sense of order to the company's chaotic, explosive growth. His logistical and managerial acumen was the steady hand that helped transform Sears from a promising venture into the largest, most trusted and most dominant retailer in all of America. It was, in essence, the Amazon of its day, a catalogue that brought the world to the doorstep of every rural farmhouse and small town. Through his stake in the company, Rosenwald became one of the nation's wealthiest men. But it is what he did with that incredible fortune that constitutes his truly remarkable and enduring legacy. Guided by the principles of his Jewish faith and a profound, unshakable sense of social responsibility, Julius Rosenwald became one of the greatest and most innovative philanthropists in the history of the United States. His name is most famously and righteously associated with his unwavering dedication to supporting African American education, particularly in the deeply segregated and under-resourced Jim Crow South. He was profoundly and personally moved after reading Booker T. Washington's autobiography, Up from Slavery. He reached out to Washington, and in 1911, the two men met and formed a powerful and historic partnership. Together, they conceived of and created a fund to build state-of-the-art modern schools for black communities that were being systematically denied proper educational facilities. Rosenwald's philanthropic model was as brilliant as his business strategy. He provided the crucial seed money for each school, but he did so on the condition that the local black communities contributed what they could, be it money, materials, or labor. And, critically, that the white-controlled local governments also committed public funds to maintain the schools going forward. This ingenious model empowered local communities, fostered a sense of ownership, and forced a degree of public accountability. Over the course of 2 decades, this remarkable program helped to build over 5,000 Rosenwald schools and related educational buildings across the South. These schools educated hundreds of thousands of black children, including many future leaders, artists, and activists like Maya Angelou and Medgar Evers. He also donated millions to universities, both historically black colleges and institutions like the University of Chicago. Furthermore, he was the key founder and driving force behind Chicago's magnificent Museum of Science and Industry, a project he championed with passion after being inspired by a visit to a German science museum. Rosenwald firmly and publicly believed that great fortunes should be given away within the donor's own lifetime in order to address the most urgent needs of the present. It was a philosophy that ensured his vast wealth made a powerful, immediate, and lasting difference in the lives of countless Americans. In the latter half of the 19th century, the city of Chicago earned a nickname that was both poetic and brutally descriptive. It was Carl Sandburg who would famously call it the hog butcher for the world. And perhaps no single individual was more responsible for that powerful title than Gustavus Swift. A sharp-minded and ambitious butcher originally from Massachusetts, Swift made the strategic move to Chicago in 1875. Once there, he proceeded to completely and utterly revolutionize the entire American meatpacking industry. At that time, the process of getting meat from the plains to the dinner table was incredibly inefficient and wasteful. Great herds of cattle were shipped live by train from the western plains all the way to eastern cities like New York and Boston, where they would then be slaughtered. This process was painfully slow, it was extremely expensive, and just as importantly, the animals lost a significant amount of weight and value during the long and arduous journey. Swift looked at this system and knew there had to be a better, more logical way. Why, he reasoned, should they ship the entire animal, the horns, the hide, the excess weight across the country? Why not slaughter the animals in Chicago, the great central hub of the nation's railways, and ship only the processed, edible meat to the population centers in the East? The single greatest obstacle to this brilliant and logical idea was the problem of spoilage. Refrigeration, as we know it, did not exist. Shipping butchered meat over long distances, especially during the heat of summer, was simply impossible. So Swift did what all great innovators do. He set out to solve the problem. He hired a talented Boston engineer named Andrew Chase to help him tackle this challenge. In the year 1878, after much trial and error, they designed and built the first truly practical and commercially viable refrigerated railroad car. The design was ingenious in its simplicity. It was a heavily insulated car with a compartment at the top, where large blocks of ice were held. As the ice melted, the chilled air, being heavier, would circulate downwards, flowing throughout the car and keeping the hanging carcasses of meat fresh for the entire journey. The idea, however, was met with fierce and immediate resistance. The powerful railroad companies, which had a vested financial interest in the higher fees they charged for shipping live cattle, fought him at every turn. Local butchers in the eastern cities, who feared his cheaper product would put them out of business, also mounted a campaign against him. But the American public could not resist the allure of the cheaper, higher quality, and more consistent meat that was now available to them thanks to his groundbreaking innovation. Swift and Company grew into a massive, vertically integrated operation. They pioneered the use of disassembly line techniques, where a carcass would move down a conveyor and each worker would perform a single, specific task. This system, which maximized efficiency, would later serve as a direct inspiration for Henry Ford's automobile assembly line. Swift was also famously efficient, creating an entire business model out of the motto of using everything but the squeal. He turned animal byproducts that were once discarded as waste into profitable secondary items like soap, glue, fertilizer, and buttons. His many innovations didn't just make him a Gilded Age tycoon of immense wealth, they fundamentally and permanently changed the way that America eats. No name is more deeply and completely synonymous with the raw, muscular, and often brutal power of the Chicago meatpacking industry than the name Armour. Philip Danforth Armour was a true titan of the industry, a man whose ambition and business acumen were matched only by his fierce and formidable rival, Gustavus Swift. His company, Armour & Company, was an absolute giant, a colossal force in the sprawling, chaotic, and blood-soaked world of the Union stockyards. More than almost any other, his enterprise helped to cement Chicago's status as the undisputed center of the American meat industry for decades. The sheer scale of his operation was a thing of wonder, a scale that is almost impossible to fully comprehend today. His factories were processing millions upon millions of animals every single year, a relentless torrent of production that fed a nation and the world. Like his great rival Swift, Philip Armour was a relentless innovator. He, too, mastered the industrial use of animal byproducts, ensuring that no part of the animal went to waste. He invested heavily in new technologies that could expand his market, most notably the process of industrial-scale canning. This allowed meat products to be preserved for long periods, enabling him to ship his goods around the globe, feeding armies and distant populations. His business acumen was the stuff of legend in Chicago, a subject of both awe and fear. But his true and most lasting legacy in the city of Chicago is not etched in the stockyards, but in the foundations of its most important institutions. He was a major philanthropist whose generous donations left a permanent and truly transformative mark on the city's educational landscape. His most famous and lasting contribution was the founding of the Armour Institute of Technology. It was a school born directly from his personal belief in providing a practical, hands-on education to the children of the city's vast working class. He wanted to give them the technical skills they would need to succeed and to advance in the new industrial age. That school, founded on his vision and his wealth, would later merge with another institution and evolve into the prestigious and world-renowned Illinois Institute of Technology. The Armour name, therefore, will forever stand as a powerful and enduring symbol of both the raw industrial might that built the city of Chicago and the forward-thinking philanthropic spirit that sought to shape its future for the better. The McCormick family fortune did not begin, as so many Chicago fortunes did, in a noisy, soot-covered factory or a bustling, chaotic stockyard. It began instead in a place of quiet contemplation, on a family farm nestled in the rolling countryside of Virginia. It was there, amidst the fields of grain, that a man named Robert McCormick tinkered with an invention. He developed a horse-drawn mechanical reaper, a device that was destined to completely revolutionize the ancient, back-breaking practice of farming. While the father had the inventive spark, it was his son, Cyrus, a brilliant, intense, and relentlessly driven businessman, who saw the machine's true global potential. He took his father's design, refined it, secured a patent for it, and then, in the year 1847, he made the single most important and consequential decision of his life. He decided to move his entire manufacturing operation to the young, vibrant, and strategically located city of Chicago. It was a masterstroke. From his new, sprawling factory situated on the banks of the Chicago River, he could easily access the vast supplies of lumber and steel he needed. But even more importantly, from Chicago, the nation's great railway hub, he could ship his reapers out to the vast, fertile grain belt of the American Midwest, the breadbasket of a hungry nation. The McCormick Harvesting Machine Company grew at a phenomenal rate, quickly becoming an industrial behemoth. It eventually became the core of the even larger International Harvester Company, a global agricultural giant. The reaper itself was nothing short of a miracle for farmers. It allowed a single person to accomplish the harvesting work that previously required dozens of farmhands working with scythes. This single invention unlocked the immense agricultural potential of the Great Plains, making it possible to feed the rapidly growing cities of America and, eventually, much of the world. The McCormicks, however, did not remain just a business family. They quickly evolved into a full-fledged Chicago dynasty. They came to dominate the city's social and political scenes. Seeking to wield even greater influence, they purchased the Chicago Tribune newspaper and transformed it into a powerful media voice for their conservative viewpoints. They built a cluster of opulent, imposing mansions on the city's fashionable Gold Coast, an enclave so dominated by the family that it became colloquially known as McCormickville. Their philanthropy was just as massive and sweeping as their fortune. They made enormous and transformative donations to institutions that defined the city's cultural landscape, including the Art Institute, the Field Museum, and what is now known as the McCormick Theological Seminary. From a single brilliant invention designed on a quiet Virginia farm, the McCormick family built an agricultural and industrial empire that shaped the course of American history and helped to define the power structure and character of the city of Chicago itself. And now, at the very top of our list, we find the man who was, for a significant period of time, arguably the richest and most influential person in the city of Chicago, and perhaps even in the entire world, Marshall Field. His name is not just associated with Chicago. In many ways, it simply is Chicago. After getting his start in the city as a young clerk and eventually partnering with the great Potter Palmer, he took control of their shared dry goods business. From that foundation, he meticulously built Marshall Field and Company into the most legendary, most elegant, and most beloved department store in the city's long and storied history. Marshall Field's entire business philosophy, the core of his empire, was captured in his simple but truly revolutionary motto, "Give the lady what she wants." He built a retail empire founded not on cheap prices or aggressive sales, but on an absolutely unshakable reputation for the highest quality merchandise, for unparalleled and deeply respectful customer service, and for an all-encompassing air of elegance and refinement that transformed the act of shopping from a mere transaction into a luxurious and delightful experience. But the full scope of his impact reached far, far beyond the world of retail. When he died in the year 1906, his personal fortune was estimated at an almost unbelievable $125 million. This was a sum so vast, so monumental, that it is difficult to truly comprehend its value even by today's standards. Like many of his Gilded Age peers, he became a monumental philanthropist in his later years, a man whose vision continues to shape the cultural and intellectual life of Chicago to this very day. His most significant gift provided the massive founding endowment for the magnificent Field Museum of Natural History, a breathtaking institution that he effectively willed into existence, creating one of the world's truly great scientific and cultural institutions. He also donated the original crucial parcel of land that allowed for the establishment of the University of Chicago's main campus, giving that fledgling institution a physical home. The Field family legacy has endured for many generations since the patriarch's death, with descendants who went on to publish the Chicago Sun-Times newspaper and who continue to be major benefactors and supporters of the city's most precious cultural treasures. More than any other name on this list, the Field family represents the absolute zenith, the pinnacle of old money power and influence in the city of Chicago, a colossal fortune built on a quiet retail revolution that left an indelible, elegant, and permanent mark on the city's very soul. So there you have it, a glimpse into the lives and legacies of the titans who built Chicago. They were a varied and complex group of individuals. They were industrialists and innovators. They were shrewd financiers and visionary merchants. They were, in many cases, great and forward-thinking philanthropists. And at times, they could also be ruthless visionaries, men who pursued their goals with a singular focus that swept aside all obstacles. They built empires of steel and of stockyards, of railroads and of retail. And in the process of building these personal empires, they poured the very foundation of the global city that we know today. Their original companies have, for the most part, merged, been acquired, or have faded into history. Their grand Gilded Age mansions that once lined the city's boulevards may now be gone, replaced by the glass and steel towers of a new era. But their legacy is not gone. In fact, it is everywhere. It's in the world-class museums they built and endowed, institutions that educate and inspire millions. It's in the globally renowned universities they funded, centers of research and learning that shape our future. It's in the very layout of the downtown streets they designed and the economic engine they first revved to life over a century ago. They remain a powerful and complex reminder of how the ambition, the genius, and at times the sheer force of will of a few individuals can profoundly shape the destiny of millions, and in the process create a city for the ages. Which of these incredible family stories surprised you the most? We would genuinely love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history's most fascinating and powerful stories. Thanks for watching.